he hated is now going to have to be his ambassador, and that's going to be a fascinating dynamic to watch from minute to minute in the Senate.
But he's used to dealing with Jim Bunning, so is this better or worse? Bunning was the great baseball pitcher for the Phillies and other teams, and he would do things like use his power to filibuster to kill popular programs like unemployment comp to the detriment of the Republican Party, probably the way he did it.
Well, I think there's two things here. First of all, if Rand Paul is exactly like Ron Paul, then McConnell's going to go crazy trying to deal with him. But if Rand Paul is the Rand Paul he's been the last few months, that is trimming his sails, as Rachel was talking about, taking the money and the national help, coming up to Washington to get the laying on of hands from the establishment and so forth, it's going to be a very interesting story to watch. And I think he's obviously going to be a little bit of both. Now, it is true that, from talking to McConnell people, there is going to be a vote on repealing health care. But if you look at the contract from America, you know, the Tea Party thing here, they did a vote. The Contract from America people did a vote on which were the most popular features of this agenda. And repealing health care was not at the top of them. It's all about limited government, balanced budget amendment, tax cuts and so forth. Repeal and replacement of health care is only number 7 and only had about 56% support from the Tea Party people themselves. But McConnell had to promise that, I think, in order to get Rand Paul on board.
I just want to point something out to Senator-elect Paul. Mitch McConnell cannot promise you anything. He is the minority leader of the United States Senate. Unless the Republicans win the majority, he cannot bring anything to a vote in the United States Senate. And you may have noticed last year, even the majority leader cannot bring anything he wants to a vote whenever he wants to bring something to a vote. There will not be a vote in the United States Senate on repealing health care reform. It will not happen.
Okay, we'll make a bet on that, Lawrence. I bet there is such a vote.
It will never come to a vote. There will be an attempt. And it will not make it to a vote.
Well, that's okay.
All right. Well, we got that out of the way. So we got the early votes and non-votes set in the Senate. We have 2 senators in the important, uncertain states going in Indiana and Kentucky. That's concluded. Let's look again at some of the bellwether House races that are beginning to, or will begin to get into focus in the next hour and a half. Chuck Todd again covering tonight's elections by the numbers. Chuck?
Hello there, Keith. Well, as you mentioned with the Senate, I just want to make one other point about what we're watching in the Senate, and that is in 18 minutes, polls close in West Virginia, and that really is going to set the tone about whether there's a realistic chance for Republicans to get 10 or not. But let me go to obviously the other big story we're following tonight, and that is whether Republicans can win the House. There's so many people predicting that they are going to. They need 39 seats. But here's why all these analysts seem to be predicting it. There's 2 other numbers I want people to focus on, 49 and 51. There are 49 Democratic districts that John McCain carried in 2008. You can see there, that's 10 more than the 39 that they can get. I will bet you if they pull this off, they will do it with a lion's share of those 49. And then whether there's a wave, that comes from the 51 down here. These are 51 Democrats sitting in districts carried by President Obama in 2008. But these are Democrats that voted for both for health care and for the climate energy bill that Republicans call cap and trade. And that is obviously something that they've been hammered on. I want to bring up one other race, though. Hey, by the way, in these early poll closings, Keith, 18 of these 100 races that we're tracking, 18 of them fall within Indiana, South Carolina, Virginia, and in Kentucky, these early races are going to call. But I want to show you one race because this is going to tell us something about whether there was an odd strategy that the Democrats had late in here, and it's best represented in the 5th district of Virginia here. And obviously, we're seeing our technology. I have a hiccup here. There it is. Okay, it's there. And it's a two-way race, basically. Either Tom Perriello or Robert Hurt's going to win. But guess what? There is a third candidate here, a conservative challenger that the Democrat, Tom Perriello, was hoping would take votes away from Robert Hurt. There are a lot of races like this tonight, guys, where the Democrat's going to get less than 50% and might win. It's going to happen in Senate races potentially out in Nevada. That's Harry Reid's path to victory. And if Democrats can get a dozen or more Tom Perriellos to pull this off and do this, very early numbers coming out of there, we don't have much to tell you, but if they pull this off, that's how they would hang on to control of Congress, because they would be able to split this conservative vote away from some of these actual Republican nominees, guys.
Perriello and Hurt facing a Mr. not appearing in your picture there.
Yes.
Thank you, Chuck. Chuck Todd by the numbers. We'll have some more numbers for you again as the polls begin to close in West Virginia, Ohio, North Carolina. That's at 7:30 Eastern, bottom of the hour. When we return, the latest from the exit polling from Indiana, the first Republican Senate pickup of the night, the first result of the night, in fact. Plus, DNC Chair Tim Kaine will join us. MSNBC's midterm election coverage continues after this.
The Place for Politics 2010, brought to you by the 100% electric, no-gas Nissan Leaf. Innovation for the planet, innovation for all.
Introducing the 100% electric Nissan Leaf. Innovation for the planet. Innovation for all.
The Premier Rewards Gold Card from American Express is designed to be brilliant. It's the only charge card to earn triple points on airfare, double points on gas and groceries, a single point on everything else. Points you can use for over 1 million rewards, including travel on any airline, anytime. The annual fee for the first year is on us, and you can earn 10,000 bonus points with your first purchase. Start earning brilliantly. Call 1-800-AXP-GOLD or visit axpgold.com to apply.
The Panama Canal must double its capacity. Building a third set of locks requires thousands of workers and a global construction consortium, all secured by a single surety bond from a single insurance company. Providing insurance expertise and global resources. Zurich Help Point. Help when it matters most.
Coming Sunday, November 7th on Disney Channel. They've got the look.
You two got that whole it factor.
The moves.
Call me, if I ever get a cell phone.
And they've got the dream.
Shake It Up Chicago, it's only like our favorite TV dance show in the world.
Cece and Rocky are shaking it up in a new Disney Channel series.
We totally just danced on TV, and we totally rocked it.
Shake It Up premieres Sunday, November 7th at 8:30, 7:30 Central on Disney Channel.
My husband worked at a power plant where the asbestos fell like snow.
My dad got mesothelioma from asbestos.
Oh, the diagnosis was devastating.
We chose Cooney and Conway because they're highly experienced in this area.
They were more than lawyers. They were human beings.
There was no money up front.
It showed my sons that there is justice in the world.
Call 1-800-360-8000. Cooney and Conway. Justice with a passion.
We had slavery. We had the Great Depression. We had Jim Crow. We had McCarthyism. The Cold War. We got through it all. And sometimes we had to argue about how to do
10
it.
seconds. Clear the set, please.
This country's had great debates in the past.
In 5, 4,
we got to do that again.
2.
North Carolina, Ohio, and West Virginia will close, as you see, in 11 minutes and change. It doesn't look like a big group at 7:30, but 13 of our 136 bellwethers in the House races are included in those 3 states. We've got new information from our exit polling. Let's go to Lester Holt with the voice of the voter. And Lester, you've got stuff on Indiana and the nationwide reaction to the Tea Party?
Yeah, well, at least the Indiana reaction to the Tea Party. We want to get a closer look at Indiana. You reported for the Republicans. They gained a seat there with Republican Dan Coates defeating Democrat Brad Ellsworth. Turns out Tea Party sentiment played a big role in this race. And I had to take a double take at these numbers, Keith. Almost half the voters in Indiana say they support the Tea Party movement. Half. That's a huge number. Just 27% there opposed. The Republican candidate, Dan Coates, won 85% of the Tea Party supporters. The Democrat got just 11% of them. And there's more. Remember just 2 years ago, Barack Obama won Indiana. Tonight, nearly half the voters said they were casting their ballot to show they oppose the president. Just a quarter said their vote was to show support. Now, we don't always associate social conservatives with the Tea Party movement, but they made up a very big percentage of the voters in Indiana today. 43% called themselves conservative, 41% were white evangelical Christians, and 54% say they were opposed to abortion. Indiana, again, a state that went for Obama in 2008, swinging back to a red state tonight. A pretty fascinating development, Keith.
Indeed, and it'll be fascinating, too, Lester, to see how that plays out when we start getting those Indiana House results. There are three key ones there in the 2nd, the 8th, and 9th, including the Barron Hills seat, when we start calling those races. There weren't exit polling done specifically on those races, but again, Lester Holt with the voice of the voter inside the exit polls. Thank you kindly, Lester. The former Virginia Governor, Tim Kaine, chairman of the Democratic National Committee, and joining us now. All right, so you're down one in the Senate. That one has been called, and Rand Paul is going to replace Jim Bunning in Kentucky. Give us your early perspective on the state of play for the Democrats on midterm eve, or midterm night, I should say, Tim.
You bet, Keith. Well, let's just start with the Senate. I think an interesting and telling one is going to be West Virginia. If the West Virginia polls, which close in a few minutes, if we get a report back that Joe Manchin has won that seat, it is very, very difficult for the Republicans to get control of the Senate. Even if they do, they still have to pretty much run the table. So that's one we're watching very closely. We don't take any race for granted, but a few months ago they felt like they would take the Senate back. We think we're going to be in good shape in the Senate. The House is where an awful lot of the attention is being paid right now. You've got polls that have just closed and polls closing soon where we'll start to know an awful lot more. But there's still a lot of voting to be done all across the country. I know folks are watching as far west as Hawaii, and I'm just encouraging you. There are going to be razor-thin races all the way to Hawaii, so please make sure you turn out and vote.
Governor, what do you think the president should say tomorrow? I mean, you're watching this. You must have talked to the other Democratic leaders. You must have given it some thought in the past weeks. Yep. What is the right course correction, if there is one?
Well, Chris, I think maybe to begin with, what is in fact the correction? The president and all Democrats, we were obviously, euphoric at the election in January 2009 at Inauguration Day, but even in that moment of maximum optimism, we knew that America wasn't a 59-41 nation. The margin in both House and Senate essentially was 59% Dem, 41% R. That's not what the electorate is. We are a closely divided electorate. That hasn't changed. One way to look at this election is just basically a reset back to where these margins are going to narrow by whatever the numbers. It's going to be a reset back to near where the American population is, and that means that
the president... Well, you say it's a center-right country, but based upon these returns, I mean, a lot of people have been saying in this country it's deep down a center-right. I'm not sure I agree with that at all, but I'm asking you, what do you think it is, the natural setting of the American people? Is it right dead center? Is it a bit to the left? Where would you put America in terms of what it wants from government?
I think it's pretty much dead center. I don't think it's center right, and you're going to have basically, three moving pieces here in the Capitol: a White House that's Democratic, a Senate that we believe will be Democratic. And while I still think there are scenarios where the Dems can hold on to the House, and maybe we can talk about that in a sec, Republicans' best case scenario, they have one of the three pieces. That means that the Democrats would have two of the three, but basically the margins are narrower, and that just means that what the president, I'm sure, will say is, look, that makes it even more imperative going forward that we work together. We've made great progress. There's more progress to make, and we're only going to make it if we work together.
Look, a lot of people are interested in politics not because they like the game, but because they like the results. They want climate dealt with. They want immigration dealt with. Can you deal with these issues in a responsible way with a country that you think the true north is right dead center, with a president who's a moderate progressive? I mean, can you do it? Can it work henceforth?
And Chris, as you might imagine, what I'm going to say is, each issue kind of stands on its own. Some are easier than others. So, for example, let's talk about one that's very, very important to Democrats: is comprehensive immigration reform. You had a vote on the DREAM Act a month and a half ago. 56 Senate Democrats voted yes. No Republican voted yes. But just 3 years ago on comprehensive immigration reform, there were 11 Senate Republicans who were willing to vote yes for a package put forward by then President Bush. All we need is, 1/4 of those or 1/2 of those willing to go along, and we can find a solution to a very, very important issue, dealing with issues about deficit and spending. The Republicans say that matters to them. Now, they voted to block the president's bipartisan deficit commission, but going forward, there's going to be opportunity to talk about those issues. I think the climate energy issues, they're tough. We did the first half of it, the incentivizing of a new green energy economy through the stimulus bill that is really pushing pushing that forward. How you deal with the disincentivizing of carbon to control climate, that's going to be tough. And we're going to have to look at what the margin is in the Senate and then figure that out. But it needs to be done.
Governor, before we let you go, what is that House scenario? We can't let you go without telling that.
So over on the House scenario, you know, I know the R's are dancing before they're in the end zone, but look, here's the House scenario for Dems, and it's one that we're paying close attention to. The Dems are going to lose seats, and they're going to lose